Hello, very good evening, all. Welcome to day three session about digital tools and open knowledge. Today we have with us my colleague Sneha and Nivas. Sneha is our research manager, got an experience more than a decade in open knowledge, and she is the person who's contributing to most of the research activities in our team. And also we have a Nivas with us, who's expert in technology, and you're going to write an exam next week. This week, right? So Nivas is the person who's actually connecting a lot of ecosystem and ensuring our technologies works well, and we believe he could be the right person to demonstrate about a couple of tools there. Yeah, thanks again. Welcome to session. Snehaji, I request kindly share your words. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks so much, Kashyap. And welcome everyone once again to this session. This is the third orientation pre-assessment session of the summer internship program. Our session today is on digital open knowledge tools. We will be talking about three main components. We will talk about digitization. We will talk about a process called optical character recognition. And we will focus on one of very important, one of the Wikimedia projects where both these processes also become quite significant. So we can move on to the first slide. Great. Okay, so that's the agenda for our session today. We'll speak briefly about digitization itself. What is the process of digitization? What do we understand by the term digitization itself? Digitization versus digitalization. I'm sure you would have heard so much about this, particularly in the last few years, especially with flagship programs like Digital India, etc. Right. So, what does digitization exactly mean? What have been its objectives, etc. What is its actual procedure? Digitization can take many forms. We will talk about very sort of one variation of one process of it. Then we will talk a little bit about OCR and why do we need OCR? What are sort of some tools that help us with OCR? Then, of course, we'll get into Wikisource basics. So my colleague Nivas and I will be, taking or conducting this session. There are also some, not activities, but walkthroughs that are planned as part of this session. So that will sort of hopefully also provide a more illustrative way of understanding some of these topics. So we can move on to the next slide. I'll start by actually, just speaking a little bit to contextualize this session, just to understand what digitization is. We would have come across the term, I'm sure, quite frequently, especially if you are actively working, say, with an open knowledge project, or if you're interested in technology more broadly. But I'm sure even in common parlance, you would have come across digitization activities, digitization initiatives. I'm sure it's very much in the news. We are in a growing, emerging digital economy, for instance. So, but what I would want to highlight is also a very subtle difference between two important terms: digitization versus digitalization. So, digitization usually refers to a very specific process, which is the transition from analog to digital. So, for instance, the change from a print document to a digital image or a scan. For instance, right? Anything that is converted from physical signals to a digital mode. So it could be anything from print to sound to video, etc. But digitalization, on the other hand, is a more complex socio-technical and I would say even political process, right? Because there are important questions to be asked about what are forms of digitalization, right? And digitalization taking place across different sectors. So whether it is education, whether it is governance, whether it is the economy, right? You would have heard so much about us being in a digitalized economy, which means now we have digital mode of payments, for instance, we have net banking, We have a lot of digital tools that help us with our academic work. We have various, digitalized forms of healthcare, for instance, right? So digitalization is a much more wider and a much more complex process with various sort of actors. But an important question to ask before we even get into what is digitization is to understand why we are digitizing, right? And a large part of this today has to really do with the growth of the internet, social media, globalized digital culture, and the developing digital economy. Digitization in its very basic, bare minimum sort of understanding that I'm talking about, which is just, turning resources from analog to digital, forms the underlying sort of layer or the basic backbone of a lot of related work that happens on the internet, for social media to function, for even our digital economy, right? So what it really needs is for a lot of digital data to be created, which actually powers this growing form of digitalization that we see all around us. So preservation of educational, socio-cultural resources, but I would also add perpetuation. So a lot of digitization efforts really have been undertaken with the objective of preservation, particularly in, and I think the sort of space that you're going to engage with as part of this, this particular internship, which is to do with Wikimedia projects, you will come across a lot of resources, particularly resources in Indian languages, many of which are in print. They are not effectively, they have not been digitized and they are not available online in many ways. So one challenge with a lot of resources, a lot of old documents, for instance, is that they may not last for very long if they are not digitized and preserved a certain way, right? So, but I would say preservation is not the only objective. What also helps is that once you digitize, you are also able to perpetuate. You are also able to circulate, particularly when you engage with an open knowledge project, when you are able to put the digitized material that you have access to, you put it out through an open knowledge project like a Wikimedia project, for instance. You are also able to ensure that it has continued access and it has access across different spaces, different demographic groups. Bridging the digital divide, digital literacy, growth of digital public infrastructures, these are also objectives of digitization, right? So to bring people into the digital economy, for instance, to be able to to access and use digital public infrastructures that are of use to the general population of a country, to enable better digital literacy, for instance, right? All of this also needs the support of digitization as such. So and research and development across various sectors, finally, is also dependent heavily on the availability of digitized corpora. And I say corpora, a large collection of digitized resources. So, and a simple example, a very contemporary topical example of this is AI, right? A lot of AI technology is heavily dependent on what kind of digitized content we have, and how accessible that content is. So you will see that especially over the last decade or so, there have been several large-scale digitization initiatives in India. A lot of these are state-supported because digitization also is a lot of work. It needs a lot of investment. It needs resources, infrastructure. The National Digital Library, for instance, has had several digitization initiatives, has a large collection of digital resources. More recently, the National Cultural Audiovisual Archives under the IGNCA, they have a very interesting audiovisual archive, which is in partnership with several cultural heritage institutions across the country, where they have digitized their records, their collections, and made it available on their website. And there are a number of large-scale private initiatives. If you see, a lot of universities, for instance, have also digitized their collections. Many private collectors, especially in the sort of glam space, right? The galleries, libraries, archives, and museum space have also digitized their collections, and also are trying to make it more accessible on the internet. So the question we should be asking also is, should we digitize everything? That is something that we see as a widely prevalent sort of phenomenon. There are important questions to ask here: questions of ownership, of access, who has ownership of digitized material, right? So is everything digitized made accessible? Right? For instance, a lot of institutions will digitize in order to keep their material, in order to keep their content safely, because printed books, old photographs may not last beyond a certain period, but they can find ways to try and make digitized copies last a little longer. Right, but then who has ownership of those copies? What about access? Is everything that we digitized also actually made available online? What about privacy, for instance, right? So something that is available as a book, once it's digitized and there are copies, then if those copies make their way to the internet, then what happens to privacy? What happens to rights of individuals that the content relates to? What about infrastructure, resources? Because digitization initiatives, as I mentioned, also need resources, need funding. So who are the people who can effectively take up digitization work, right? And what are limitations? Are there technical limitations to what we can digitize? And this we will talk about a little bit also when we come to the OCR, for instance, right, which has been a prominent challenge, particularly for Indian language resources. So digitizing content in Indian languages, what are some unique say features which can also become challenges when we talk about digitization? And what is the manner of use, right? So once we digitize, how is the content used, right? Does it make its way to an open knowledge project? Does it find its way to a social media platform? Do you see that content on YouTube, for instance, right? So then who ends up using digitized content? How is it used? How is it circulated? These are also important questions to ask. And finally, coming to, I think, the sort of main theme of our internship and the session itself, the role of open access and free knowledge movements, and where digitization has continued to kind of inform the growth of these movements, the growth of a digital commons, right? So digital commons is essentially a large and openly accessible, available collection of resources that are digital, that are for the public good, in a sense. And the open access and free knowledge movements have contributed to building this digital commons, right? So projects like Wikimedia projects, for instance, right, have contributed for a long time in building the digital commons. And some of this work has also been actively through supporting digitization where possible, by trying to understand what kind of content is in the public domain, by creating awareness, by also building that awareness around licensing, for instance. How do we bring sort of content into the public domain? How do we digitize? How do we put it up, for instance, on Wikisource? Right. So I think these have been initiatives that Wikimedia projects have engaged with. So this is just a brief sort of overview of what is or why digitize, really. So the context to digitization. We can move on now to the next slide. Yeah. So here we'll talk about just the basic process of digitization. If you look at it in a very simple sort of way, even though each stage of this process can actually be quite challenging depending on what kind of content is being digitized, where it is being done, right? What kind of institution is taking up digitization projects. So, but at a very simple level, if you look at it, digitization, of course, is more than just taking photos. In a very theoretical sense, yes, once you take a picture of something, you create a digital image of something, it is digitized. But there is so much more happening there, right? So scanning, for instance, or this is digitization of printed. We'll talk about text here, printed documents. The idea is, when you scan a physical document, you convert it into a digital image using a scanner or a camera. What gets added to this digital copy is, details. And you will see this when you take pictures. You would have noticed this when you look at pictures that you have taken from your camera, even with your phone, for instance, right? So there are basic details like the time that the photo was taken. There is a title, there is an author. You can also add and edit these details, the language, the date to the digital file, etc., right? Which actually makes this file identifiable. It makes it easy to find this file, for instance, in a collection of 1,000 photographs that you may have taken. What follows next is the second component of this presentation that we were talking about, which was optical character recognition. Right? So basically, the idea is how, when you have a printed document, how is it that you are able to find something in that document, right? Because otherwise, what you have is an image. At the most, you can find, out of 1,000 photographs, you can find the 335th photograph. But you will not be able to tell what is in that photograph, or you will not be able to say, in a particular document, you have digitized 1,000 pages of text, but you will not be able to tell what exactly, is there in the 335th page, right? So what OCR does is turn that text into editable characters, into something that you can actually read, right? So software that reads the image and turns the text into editable characters. All of this, of course, seems to be like, and if it is done well, like a highly automated process. But the truth is that there is always human intervention at work here, right? You do need a person who checks the OCR output and fixes mistakes, because especially when you're working with content in various languages, there is always scope for something that does not get rendered correctly, something that does not turn out exactly the way it is, in or what is meant to be understood from that particular page or printed document. We can move on to the next slide. Thanks. So yeah, so just as an example, the first step would be scanning. So you scan old books in a high resolution. So the example is a public domain book, old, so say an old Telugu manuscript. The second stage would be to add book details. I think the example here, Srimad Bhagavatam by Putana in Telugu. So this is a public domain work. So you will add, as I mentioned earlier, the details of the book, the author, the title, the date of publication, various other, the publishing press, for instance, right? So you will add the place it was published. These are all the metadata that you can add. Create an index, a table of content. So you'll have chapter list, page order, etc., etc. The OCR will extract editable text from the image. So the text actually becomes searchable and editable. And the final stage would be to check and correct for errors. So compare the scan with the OCR output and proofread to understand whether, the OCR output has actually been rendered correctly. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. So yes, so this is, really where we talk about, this is a fairly technical process, but, why does it become important when we do this in relation to public domain material? And why does metadata specifically become important, right? So public domain, because, this is something that a lot of organizations that are undertaking digitization would also sort of speak about this, right? Which is the challenge with preservation, because we're not able to keep, old books, content that are no longer under copyright, etc. They're also not able to keep a lot of this material. So preservation becomes an important imperative. But more than that, just that once you know that there is content that is no longer under copyright, that content becomes free to use. It becomes more accessible. It becomes something that you can share can be reused. In a sense, it can be. It becomes much more accessible to a wider uh, section of people. So if you look at, I mean, some of the examples here, ancient poetry, scientific records, historical records, etc. Putting this content out in the public domain actually makes this content much more accessible and usable by a wider group of people. But then merely digitizing them is not helpful, right? So you can't digitize and then keep it. That becomes digitization for preservation. But then if you're looking at digitization as a way to perpetuate, to make sure that this material actually becomes open knowledge in the true sense, right? Then the idea is, because they're already in the public domain, they are, you don't have a copyright issue as such to deal with. Then digitizing and putting them on an open knowledge project or space actually becomes a good way to share this material. But how will you find it, right? How does this material become discoverable? So that's where metadata becomes very important. It helps you find books quickly by title, author, topic, etc. Like I mentioned, out of 1,000 pages of digitized text, you have each book, or each page actually gets a unique ID, so you're actually able to find that specific page and content on that specific page. It helps you actually categorize, sort text by, or books by language, by date or type, so out of 1,000 books that you digitized, 400 of them are in Telugu. The remaining are in these various languages, etc. So many were published within a particular period of time. So many of them are periodicals, many of them are magazines, these were newspapers, etc. Right? So this actually helps when you are talking about future use, or making the content much more usable. It is useful for students, it is useful for researchers, for creative work, for anyone working in that particular domain, right? So whether it is literature, if it is healthcare, if it is law, for instance, you can actually talk about, or you can actually use this content. So OCR also presents challenges, and I think you will come across this as you work through the practice sessions and working with OCR tools. The main challenges, of course, deal with vowels, vowel forms that can change the shape of the letters. So this is specific to languages, of course. So, I mean, there are some examples mentioned here: vowel marks, diacritics, for instance, which will change the pronunciation and the sounds, short and long sounds. And this is, because so much of our language is also to do with, how we speak it, right? So large set of consonant characters, each with unique shapes, compound letters. So normal OCR, this isn't specifically in the context of Telugu here, but this differs across languages. So normal OCR misreads many Telugu words, so therefore special tools are needed. We look at, in the next slide, we can move on to the next slide. Yeah, we'll look at three main OCR tools for Telugu that are currently, I understand, widely used. You have Google OCR, which actually uses advanced AI. So therefore, there is also some understanding of context. This works online, so there's no installation as such needed. Tesseract is also a fairly widely used OCR tool. It's open source, free to download and use, and can be used offline. And Indic Scripts tool, Indic OCR, is also, it's built for Indian languages. So for Telugu texts in particular, this has good accuracy, and it handles some of those challenges related to vowels and vowel marks, right? So these are three tools that we've discussed here in this session, but I'm sure there are many others that you can think of. But it's an area of work that that it's an area that needs more work and more research. Right. So I think I'll hand over now to my colleague Nivas, who will take you through the rest of this session, and also some of the walkthroughs of the tools and the projects, Wikisource in particular. Yeah, back to you, Kashyap.
Sorry, I had a mic issue. I had to touch back once. But yeah, thank you so much, ma'am, for handing over. And thank you so much for giving a context on digitization and the difference between digitization and digitalization. I will quickly jump into the space of Wikisource, the project which most of you will be working on. So, for somebody who has attended the first and second sessions, which happened yesterday and day before yesterday, Wikisource is one of the projects, sister projects of Wikimedia and Wikipedia. So all of these projects are more or less interconnected and try to work for the common goal of bringing open knowledge accessible to everyone. And yeah, I'll skip to the slides. Yeah. Uh, Yeah. So, like I said, Wikisource, is an free and online library for public domain texts into a more readable, searchable formats, which hosts public domain texts like books, poems, history, judicial documents, and many more. This is inspired by a project called Project Gutenberg from 1971. The more or less both the projects work on the similar idea, which is trying to bring public text available for everyone in a more readable and accessible format. While Project Gutenberg majorly is built on the purpose of bringing high quality public domain literature works for everyone, Wikisource, on the other hand, was primarily built with the purpose of building repository of public domain text while preserving the original version of the text as well, irrespective of a given field. So it is not just limited to literature, but it is also, like I mentioned, judicial documents, could be constitution, could be comic strips, anything on those lines. So yeah, but what do I mean by collection of public texts in a more readable and searchable format? So let me break that into two pieces for you. The first one is the public domain text. Like somebody who might have heard today's session or yesterday's session, you might have heard this word public domain text, which is where we are trying to talk about texts that are copyright free and texts that can be accessed by anyone without any without crossing a paywall. Uh, so yeah, public domain texts. I think some of the examples are, you all know that Popeye the Sailor Man is one of your comics of growing up. So it has entered into the public domain. A couple of Mickey Mouse comic strips has entered, and a beautiful work of Charlie Chaplin is going to enter into public domain next year. So there are different formats that can enter into public domain. Could be movies, videos, text, images, but Wikisource primarily focuses on text formats. Could be like a book, or could be like a comic strip, could be a report. So yeah, this is one piece of pillar of Wikisource. The other one is readable and searchable format. So talking about readability and searchability of text, there are certain texts that are already available as searchable formats, but are not in a readable fashion, or not able to be in a versatile way where you can convert them from PDF to EPUB or text versions of it. I think one of the examples that I can give right now is the Constitution of India. So, although the Constitution of India, the recent release of 2020 was in public domain, it can be accessed as a PDF version. It has certain restrictions around the page of the page and the contents of each and every page, which makes it non transferable into any other formats like EPUB or MOBI or text versions. So, which is where Wiki source makes it possible into more searchable fashion, into more readable fashion as well. Uh, yeah. Yeah. So one more thing that as soon as you go into the Wikisource project, you will be able to see there are two panels on your screen, which is a right panel where you find editable OCR text, while left panel is a left panel where you can find an editable OCR text, and a right panel where you can find virtual scanned images. I'm talking with respect to your screen reference. So anywhere where you can see the original version is more or less like an image format, and the text is not searchable on that format. While the OCR version, you can find it as a text format. You can edit it. You can make modifications to it with respect to what the source looks like. So, which is a flexibility that Wikisource project gives you. I'll just show you how the project looks like in the English Wikisource, and we can probably go on how the contribution on Wikisource looks like. So yeah, if you can see my screen, this is how English Wikisource looks like. This is the welcome page, and you can find many things on some of the April featured texts or new texts that are there, and how many of current texts are available in English. And this varies depending on language to language. Say, in case if you open a Marathi, you might have a different version of text and different homepage, but the structure looks more or less the same. Uh, Before we go into how can you contribute on Wikisource, there are two terms that you might have to understand. So the first term is called index, and the second term is called page. So index is so the current page that you're looking at, Constitution of India, 9 September 2020, is an example of an index, and you can also find it here, which starts with index colon Constitution of India. So, which is what it talks about. It looks like more or less like a dashboard page, which contains the metadata of the particular work, title, author, year of distribution, publication, where did it happen, the source of it, what is the progress with respect to trans proofreading, and the status of transclusion of that particular work. Like I mentioned, the second one is page, which is more or less like a piece within the whole work in itself. So you can also find a section within the index page itself, which has all the list of pages and what is the page title or what is the page number of it, which also talks about your status of proofreading of that particular work. So yeah, your page looks more or less like this. You can see one original version of the source file in an image format onto the right side of the screen, and a transcribed version of the same source into a text format on to the left side of the screen. Uh, yeah, so coming to contribution cycle on Wikisource, so there are two things that you might have to know more. Considering you will be more or less working on transcription and proofreading rather than any other pieces. These two will help you understand what is the journey going to look like. So the first one is going to be the page status on any indexed work that you're going to work with. So there are majorly five types of colors that you'll be seeing on the page on any index page that you open. The first one being purple, and the second one being gray. These two are more or less colors that you might not have to worry about or work with. So any page with has purple color means there is a problem with the page, or it needs more illustration work than a text reading work. So these such pages are marked in purple color, and people who are more or less into the visualization part or who works with vectors handle those pages rather than somebody who's reading or proofreading the pages. The second one is gray pages, which is where you don't find any text in the page at all. It has nothing more like a blank page that is left on purpose or something on those lines. The third one is your red color, which says it is not proofread. Fourth one is yellow, where it meaning that it's proofread but not validated, and green one is where proofread has happened and somebody has validated that proofread page. So you can see here the different colors here. So the first box you can probably see there is a gray color, which means there is no text in that page, and then you can find a green color, which means it is completely validated, and then yellow color, which is where somebody has proofread but another person should hasn't validated it, and the red numbers, which is where that particular page is not at all proofread. So something also for you to understand is somebody who has done proofread cannot validate their own work, and we'll show with an example as well. So yeah, coming to the contribution cycle. So what does the contribution flow look like on Wikisource? So you first identify your index work that you want to work with, and then choose an OCR model that works best for your text. Some like you have seen in Sneha ma'am's slide, Indic OCR works better for Indic language text, while Google OCR works better for English language text. So once you choose the model, you work on transcription using the platform, and then you get the source version into a text format onto your left side of the screen, and then which is when you will start proofreading it, because there might be errors, there might be some missing pieces in this whole OCR process, which is where you'll read manually and try to fix them. The final step is where you'll have to work on final formattings. Could be center aligning some of the title text, or making sure that your punctuations or anything are not missed, or your header and footer sections are more or less in line. And then linking your metadata so that this work is not lost as one of the pieces, but tries to link to other works of either the author or the publisher. Um, yeah. So yeah, the next one is using OCR and proofreading on Wikisource. So how do you do an OCR, and how can you proofread on Wikisource? So once you open Wikisource editing pages, you can see there is a button called transcribe text. Once you click on the transcribe text, you can find OCR engines like Google, Tesseract, or Indic, which you can choose one of them that fits perfectly for your text. Once you click on them, the tool itself helps you convert the scanned image and produces an editable text format for you. Once you get this editable text format, you might have to check for correction, spelling mistakes, or any of the structure errors that the OCR has done. And you might have to compare the OCR text with the original scanned image. The goal is try to get 100% of match between the digital version and the original book. And verified pages are marked, like I've shown you, your proofread pages will be marked into yellow color. And after your proofread is done, somebody will come and then do the second round of verification. Like already mentioned, you cannot do the validation all by yourself, because there is a good chance that errors that you might have seen might have missed on fluke, and it's always have to have extra pair of eyes on it. Yeah, something that you can take back as a practice work is how can you proof, what are some steps that you have to do while proofreading and formatting. Like we have mentioned, first you have to select a page on wikisource.org that you want to work on, then try to compare your panels after you do an round of OCR. The scanned version and the OCR text version should match as much as possible. And if there are any errors or spelling mistakes or formatting issues, probably you might have to check for it, and then you have to uh, clean it up and make sure that the formatting is properly available on text completely. Yeah, and the other one is the metadata. So metadata, like I've shown you, it is available on the index page of the work itself. And these are some of the things that you might find. So it's always better that you fill in the preliminary information that is needed. And once your proofreading of all the pages are done, somebody has validated, it's better that the metadata is then updated to make sure to let everybody know that this work has been completely proofread and also validated by another person. Uh, so yeah, I think I'll show just one version of how that looks like, and then probably I'll play a short video where somebody is trying to work on this transcription. So yeah, I'm opening the Constitution of India on Wikisource. Like you can see, uh, this is the index page where you can find pages that are proofread, which are in yellow color, and there are also pages that are not at all proofread. And similarly, there are pages that are validated as well. So I'll show you one page that is not proofread. So you can see, like I mentioned, there is an option called transcribe text. As soon as you click on it, you'll get a small notification saying that what does this particular button does to your work. So it transcribes all the images on your right side of the screen to into a more text format onto the left side of the screen. So once I click on it, you can see the transcribing has started, and it has made sure that all the content from the image format has been successfully transcribed into text format. But you can also see there are some errors that happened. The the first line of this first paragraph has ended with submitted, so the OCR has also made sure that the line is ending at submitted rather than not trying to continue with the sentence, although this is more or less like a sentence that is in continuation with the other upcoming words. So what you can do is you can just clear it out, and then you can make sure that it's all in one line. Or you can also use some tools and make sure that these are these errors don't come up. I think probably you might need some more understanding of it, which we'll probably skip now. But yeah, yeah. So you might have to check for these minimal errors. Make sure that these errors are to a minimum before you submit it for proof for next round of validation. So yeah, the second error that you can also see is before this square bracket, there is an number one, but the OCR has taken it as a symbol, and it has given it as a symbol. So yeah, you might have to format here and give the number one, and then make sure the correct formatting is done, because it's not a regular number, but it is more like a superscript of an for a text that is already there. So there are certain things that you might have to take care before you submit. But yeah, once you do this once you do this proofreading process, you will be able to see these page status options. Currently, it is on the red status, which means like nobody has proofread. Once I have done, I'll submit it on yellow, and then click publish page. So as soon as you click on yellow and click on publish page, that is when the page will reflect here with yellow color box instead of this red color text, which means you have successfully proofread the page, and somebody needs to come and validate that page. Once it's validated, only then you'll be able to see it in the green color. So yeah, I'll play a short video of somebody doing this on a live, and somebody submitting it for the next round as well. Um,
here because that hasn't been touched yet, and that will take a bit more work, I'm sure. It likely so to go back, sorry, the first text that loads when you first open a new page has been brought in from the OCR, the optical character recognition process. So it's not necessarily very correct. Certainly, in some works, it's very good quality. It looks like this one is reasonably accurate, but there are lots of things where we need to fix. So starting at the top, we look at the header, so the page number and the chapter title, or sorry, the work title in this case. we're on the left-hand page here, so it's often the work title. And you can see here in the header area, we've got RH, that means running header. And that's a template that will format this in the same layout. It'll have the page number left aligned and then a centered work title. And there's other options to this. You can have a right-hand aligned one. So you can see here it's pre-filled the running header with 176, Napoleon, and 176. And so that's a convention that makes it slightly quicker, because all we need to do here is remove the second one. So on the right-hand page, we would have removed the first one and kept the right-hand most. And so that's been repeated down here, so I'll delete that. And then I'll run a page cleanup script, toolbar button here, sorry, that will remove all of those new lines and reflow the text, just to make it quicker while we're doing this demonstration. You can see here there aren't any new paragraphs in this page, and so it is all one paragraph. The beginning of the page is a carried on sentence from a previous page. There's nothing we need to do there. And similarly, at the end of the page, we don't need to do anything complicated. However, we do need to read through and make sure that all of the punctuation is correct and other typographical issues. So, for instance, long live the emperor, there should be no space after and before the quotation marks. And I think there was another one further down. For God's sake, place yourself before him, and to the end of that. So that's down here, for God's sake, place yourself before him. Apart from that, it's all looking reasonably correct. You can see here, we've got the excess of my joy, comma, for what? Obviously that's incorrect. So if we look down here, it's actually comma and then open quotation mark and what. So we'll add that in. And we'll just check that at the end of that, nope, there's an extraneous space there. So we need to make sure that everything like that is completely accurate. If there were misspellings or typos or other errors in the text, we maintain those. We don't correct anything. We're only correcting to the scan. We're not correcting or editing the text in any other way. So everything that's in the left-hand text should be visible in the right-hand text. So I think I've done this reasonably well. So see, I can now move it to yellow or proofread, but it doesn't let me move it to green or validated. That's because somebody else has to come along and do that after me. So if I hit publish, we can now see that it has been proofread, but it needs to be validated. And if we go back up to the index page, we'll see that here it is, 176. And you can see that it doesn't have a red border. It doesn't have any border. And that's telling me that I can't go in validate that page. I can validate all of these other ones, but I can't do that one because I was the one who proofread that. So that's, in a nutshell, basically the process that we go through for page after page. There's a lot more to be done, like tables of contents. And if I go to the beginning of the work, the beginning of the chapter, you'll see that we maintain large font, bars, all sorts of typographical things. So I'll just go in and edit this so you can see some more complicated transcription. So here we're using a whole bunch of different templates. DHR, that's double height row, that gives a bit of extra space. C and XX larger, that's centered and then a larger font for that part. And then lower down, we're also centering chapter 1, but we're only doing X larger. So X larger is larger than X larger. And then again, larger is smaller than those. You can see that I begin, this part of the first sentence is in small caps, and so the SC template is used for I begin. And also down here for the section header. There's a large number of other ways that things can get formatted, and lots of templates, and you can have templates that are specific to a given work if there's a lot of repetition, and that makes it easier to proofread. I won't go into all of those now because this is really just how can you get into finding a work and starting proofreading on it. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know if there's anything else that we can try and make clear. Cool. Thank you.
So yeah, that's Sam Wilson. Credits to him. Is somebody who has been working with the Wikisource community for a very long time and has created this very short introduction to proofreading on Wikisource. So I think the link is shared on the live chat as well. So somebody who's free, you can know how to proofread and also how to validate any work that was already proofread by somebody. uh, yeah, you can watch that video some other time later. Or there is also a 1 hour introduction to Wikisource by Satdeep as well. So you can watch that as well in case if you want to know more details about how to contribute to Wikisource in a larger, in a long run. But yeah, I think that's Wikisource project and how can you contribute by proofreading at this stage. Yeah, I think that's it from my end. Thank you for having me. Over to you, Kashif.
Thank you so much, Nivas Garu. Indeed, it was a great session. So let me check if any someone got an ask about, for example, if any book got fifth line that page ends.
I can answer that. If I'm not wrong, what the comment is, in case if it ends at fifth line with tradition and there is some continuity, you should not make sure that these two are two different lines. Since it's all belonging to one paragraph, you should make sure that all of it comes into one paragraph. We try to make sure that the proofreading happens per page and it is not limited to per paragraph content. I can also show once on the previous example that we have been picking up. Um, Yeah, so if you can see this example, we are not able to get until may refer to in the first line itself. So we have made sure that it came in the second line. So it is not mandatory that you have to end with the exact words. But one thing that you might have to keep in mind is, say in case if there is an spelling error that is there in a particular sentence or a particular paragraph in the image version, you should make sure that the spelling error is also in the same way on the OCR as well, because we are trying to digitize this particular image into a text version, but we are not trying to uh, correct it and make sure it is the right version. So we are just trying to make sure the image format is literally transferred into a text format. And yeah, like I mentioned, you need not necessarily end with the same words like how the image version shows you. Uh, if it's under one paragraph, you can make sure all of the content is falling into this structure, but not making sure that how it is on the image format.
Thank you, Nivas Garu. There will be other question about
I have did digitization for few pages of his answer book. I don't notice those slides creating mistake to those. Doing OCR is, I would say, it eases your job. Like you don't need to type the whole text again from scratch. Say in case if this 133rd page of Constitution of India, in case if you have to type it all the way from the very first letter, it will be very difficult. Just imagine in case if you're thinking of a page, then for the whole 256 pages, I think it will take a lot of time for you, which is where we are trying to use OCR to make sure it picks up as many things as possible and tries to convert into a text format, over which you can do minimal modifications to make sure the page is recreated into the text version. So I think that is it. But like you mentioned, the OCR for Indic languages, I think there are a couple of OCRs that work for a couple of like only for certain languages. Like Indic OCR more or less works for Telugu, Tamil, and other languages. So I think you might have to see what OCR works for Sanskrit and use it. I think, like I mentioned, the accuracy for Indian languages is somewhere between 80 to 90%. So it's always best that working with the existing OCR and then you proofreading it and making necessary modifications will make more sense. Navneet has a question. Do we learn everything like adding reference on the pages, sometimes special characters in the book? Uh, I would say yes, but not everything. Like since you're doing only proofreading, it's important that you can do as many adding special characters as possible. But if you, I think for which I think you should also know something called as templates and a little more, and things get complicated over time. So it's always best that you just do the proofreading part first. And since it's not going to be the final version and somebody has to come and validate it, they'll always do the formatting pieces later as well. You can just make sure the text pieces are correct now, and a couple of things that are easier, like running headers or anything on the footer sections, or maybe the text needs to be centered. I think there is a small cheat sheet, probably we can share it later on the email as well. But yeah, that would be a short answer. Yeah, OCR is compulsory. It will make your life easier compared to writing everything manually from scratch for every single page of the text. The
Thank you
OCR.
so much, Nivas Garu.
Yeah.
So as we reach that time, uh, so uh, thank you folks for participating. Tomorrow we have very important session. One is about Wikidata, and as well as a lot of people asking for how the screen test format would be like. We try to answer a couple of questions. Thank you so much. Bye for now.
Thank you all. Bye.